Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to episode 118 of the Unsecurity podcast. Today is February 9th, 2021. I'm your host today, Brad Nye, and joining me as usual is my good friend and co-worker, Evan Francine. Good morning, Evan.
Good morning, Brad.
I can see by the palm trees that you are not here in Minnesota enjoying the below zero temperatures.
I know. Thank God for that, man. There are some, once in a while, some privileges, and you get to get away for a little bit.
You definitely lucked out with the timing because this has been our coldest weather of the season by far.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, man. It sounds like I have chickens, and my daughter called me when I was down here a couple of days ago. She says, it's going to get down to 30 below. Should I bring the chickens in the house? And I'm like, hell no. Yeah. You leave them outside. They have a chicken coop, and they survived. So that was like the coldest weather I think we're going to get. But yeah.
Yeah, the coming weekend's going to be pretty brutal, but what are you going to do? Hey, at least
it's Minnesota.
Everything is closed. I don't have to go anywhere. So, there is some positives.
Yeah, that's true. And it's, it makes you grateful that you got a furnace that works and blankets,
Yeah, so much that.
Yeah, but it hasn't been, it's been kind of a mild winter overall, I think. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, our snow seems to be pretty low so far.
Yeah, and I was reading in the news that the Northeast, I think, is getting hit again with a pretty major snowstorm, if they haven't already. So they're busy digging out.
Yeah, those nor'easters can drop some snow in a hurry. And usually it's like wet, heavy snow too.
Yeah. I don't know, man. The older I get, when I was younger, I used to like, I think I had more energy and I liked playing around. But now, at the age of 50, I'm like, no, don't want it. It hurts. Everything hurts.
Yeah. It's a special feeling that when you go outside and you can feel the inside of your nose freezing and crystallizing.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, man. I mean, you talk about age, the older you get too, the longer your nose hairs get. I don't know if you noticed that. So they collect more, condensation from your breath. And then, you get, plug your nose up with ice.
I definitely get it in the mustache with at the butt stop or whatever. Doesn't take long.
Dude, yeah. I've taken a shower before. You've probably done this too. I've taken a shower before and didn't let my beard fully dry. And then, ran an errand or something. And yeah, it's like my beard becomes ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something.
I like it. I was talking to, for listeners, you've heard him before, Oscar Minks yesterday. Now we were talking about weather. We were talking about a bunch of things, talking about some weird stuff with forensics and whatever. But I'm like, so what kind of weather do you like? He goes, man, 40s is like perfect for me. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you? That's too damn cold too.
No, I don't know. It depends. I do enjoy the seasons. It does make you appreciate the other ones.
Yeah, I suppose. And like I said, I don't take for granted the blessing of being able to travel, so being in Mexico right now, it's weird because, COVID has changed the travel industry so much.
Mm-hmm.
We're on a resort in Puerto Vallarta, and they're very, very safe here. Everybody wears masks. I need to get a COVID test. This morning, actually, I'm getting a COVID test in order to get back into the country, back into the U.S. You have to have a negative test within 3 days of your departure. So I got that scheduled this morning at 9:15. But you're down here in the resort that we're staying in. There are some nights where you feel like you're the only one here in the whole resort.
Wow,
it's nuts.
Yeah, it's very different.
I feel bad because these people, especially here, they're so dependent upon our tourist dollars, to pay their bills, to feed their families. So on one hand, you feel like during a pandemic, maybe you shouldn't travel. But I think as long as you're responsible, but then on the other hand, it's like you feel good about it because you are helping somebody eat.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, one of these days we're going to have to get you down here.
I know.
We're going to have to bring you. I've said that before, but with we're at different stages of life too, right? I got one child left at home, and you still got 3.
Mm-hmm.
So coordinating, daycare and. But
Yeah.
you're young, man. I didn't start traveling. I'm 50 years old now. I didn't start traveling like this until like 3 years ago. So I was 47. So you
Yeah,
still got like 18 years before you get to my age.
we've done a couple of cruises and done some travel, but not a lot. But yeah, it's kind of funny because your youngest is basically the same age as my oldest.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. So I know the phase of life that you're going through. Right? You were sharing last night about, kind of just all the health things and kids and arranging stuff. And man, that's chaotic. But I remember it.
Yeah. So my oldest got sick and had a low-grade fever, and so the high school called and was like, you got to come get her. And oh, by the way, all the siblings have to quarantine until she gets a negative COVID test because that's how things go now. And
Right.
so I got that call at like 9:15, and I had a 10 o'clock training session with the executive, like board C-level, director level of one of our big VC clients. So the high school is about 15 minutes or so. And then I got to the high school, and that's when they told me, oh yeah, by the way, you got to pick up your son at elementary school too. So I was like, ah. So I got,
and maybe that's a good topic for, an upcoming show is just juggling family and security stuff.
yeah. Well, and so I made it. I got home and logged into the meeting at 10:01. So I was a little panicked, but got there and it went really well. So that's good. But yeah, it's tough because my wife's a nurse. She can't just be like, well, sorry.
Right.
Different kind of expectation around that. So just happy we're we're at FRSecure, we're so flexible to kind of allow for that emergency. Like, oh, I dropped out of the all company meeting and missed the consulting meeting. I was like, I got to do what I got to do.
Well, yeah, for sure, man. And well, that's the culture too, though, right? I mean, nobody's going to give you crap when you go run to your family.
Oh no. Yeah, no, it was super supportive. Like, Renee was like, okay, go. And then when I got back, she was like, how's everything? Is everybody okay? People actually care. It's good.
Right. Yeah, Ryan, for people, listeners who don't know, Ryan is the chief security consultant or whatever, senior security consultant over at Security Studio. And he's taking his first vacation. He never, I don't know, he's never taken a vacation here, but he's got like 4 days and he's running hard, man. I mean, we're all run hard. And he emailed me yesterday because we have an important meeting next week and he's going to be on vacation. So he's like, well, do you want me to dial in? I'm like, hell no.
Yeah.
No. You take a vacation to disconnect, and the last thing I want you doing is connecting during your disconnection.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough to do though. It does take some willpower. I did have vacations scheduled around Thanksgiving and then had the health issues, which pretty much forced a disconnection, but it wasn't exactly relaxing. But it was like 10 days where I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Well, and so now that we're talking about it, do you have a vacation planned?
Not yet. We're trying to figure that out.
You want some help?
No, it's just scheduling. I
Yeah.
mean,
I'll help you plan it.
Yeah. Yeah. We were going to go down and visit my sister down in Fort Myers for spring break last year, and obviously that was the last week of March, so we missed that right when everything shut down.
Yeah,
so that kind of sucked, but we'll probably go do that again. fun to see her and her kids, and our kids like hanging out with her kids. So it's always good.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's good for that work-life balance,
Yeah.
which, somebody sent me a book that said the work-life balance is a myth. I'm like, maybe if different interpretations of work-life balance, but I think a work-life balance is, because they are so integrated. You know what I mean? My work is kind of my life, and life is kind of work. I mean, but it's just that being able to just stop working for a while, go do something enjoyable, go see the world, walk, ride a bike, do something, just get away from, you know, the connection all the time. Because if you're connected too much, man, it becomes hell.
Well, the saying is, what is it? Work to live, not live to work. Right? Work to do
Yeah.
things you enjoy, not just work.
Yeah. No, that's totally true, brother.
So, but yeah, it's we'll get there. It's been everybody is going through the same type of stuff, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
adjusting and moving on.
totally. So what security stuff what we got today?
Yeah, I was thinking we could talk a little bit about the difference of between security or secure, being secure, and compliance, and being in compliance, and what does that mean? And just because of we're getting a lot of questions and a lot of really good conversations from potential customers with CMMC and that being such a big piece in the news, and like what the confusion is or what their expectation and understanding are versus kind of how we do things. And so I thought it'd be a good topic because I know you're pretty passionate about that as well.
Yeah, it's frustrating, man, because you and I have managed so many security programs before, and I don't know how many times I've heard out of the mouths of board members or CEOs, what's the quickest way we can get whatever compliance? What's the cheapest way we can get whatever compliance? And that's, it's 100% or 180-degree opposite of the way you're supposed to be thinking, right? The way security is supposed to be integrated into the business. It's the only way you're ever going to get any return on your investment. It's so doing things the secure way, it's just part, making it part of your culture. And if you do it the compliance way, where compliance is your definition of security, then you miss out on all of that, and you miss out on a significant amount of risk.
Yep. Yeah. So I'd had a VCSO that I was working with, that their security program went through their compliance officer and never made any. It was, well, I will say they never made progress. They did actually get some really good stuff done, like rolling out multi-factors and some of those types of things, but it was just painful. Like security was not a priority in any way. And then, I've got others that are like wanting to do things the right way. And it's just it's a breath of fresh air. It's invigorating to like
Right.
energizing this word, to work with a company that is like all in like, hey, okay, what should we be doing? How should we be doing this? What is the right way? Are we doing this the right way? How can we improve it? And kind of peppering me with questions. Like I said, yes, they ask if they have a whole bunch of new leadership that's come in over the last year. And that's why they asked, I said, hey, we've got this meeting scheduled. Can you join and talk about security and some incident response stuff? And it's like, absolutely. I think anytime you can get in front of C-levels and board or whatever, directors, yeah.
Right. No, and that's it, man. I mean, I don't understand. I've been studying people for so long. It's still hard to understand. Well, I don't understand. I think nobody does. Because in general, people don't like to be told what to do.
Right.
They usually go against, or at least there's some resistance or some uneasiness about being told what to do. Yet in information security, they like the compliance thing because I mean, you're basically doing what you've been told to do. But then on the other hand, I mean, how often do we hear people that actually want to do security the right way that also say, well, just tell me what to do.
Mm.
So I think a lot of it's just kind of a mental, if you start off with your security program, or if you are a checklist type of, company, doing security by the checklist or it's changing the mind of the way you approach it.
Yeah, there are benefits to having those checklists, right? Like,
Oh, for sure.
I'm all on board with some of that stuff, but I think you're right. It's the mindset behind how those are created, how those are implemented, right? It's not, all right, I'm just doing this and that's it. It's not robotic, but it's
Right.
when I'm doing this thing, I need to make sure I get these things covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that and I've always said this too, there's two ways to approach compliance. You've got the letter of the law versus the intent of the law. And the shortest path to compliance is to do the letter of the law.
Yep.
Because it doesn't require much for interpretation. I can create checklists out of it. I can just, follow along. Now, what oftentimes gets enforced, though, is the intent.
Mm-hmm.
So you find yourself kind of in this false sense of security, like I did all these things.
Uh-oh. May have lost Evan. See if he comes back. Well, we wait for him to. Oh, there he is. Hi, Evan. You're back.
Hey, might be my VPN.
Yeah, it froze up there for a bit, but yeah,
I was on a rant. I was on a rant too, man.
I agree with you though. It's like I see the compliance as being building code. It doesn't mean it's all you have to do. It's the bare minimum you have to do.
Well, right. Well, and so, and I think what I was talking about before I cut myself off with my VPN. By the way, VPN, public Wi-Fi, good idea.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you do the checkbox security, you have this false sense of security because you've checked off all the boxes. You think that you're compliant, so you're not watching for these other things that are outside of that letter of the law. Because you can never fully communicate the intent of something, in documentation, in words, right? So you check off all the boxes. You think, oh, we're secure because you're telling executive management that you're compliant. Executive management, that's the only thing they're maybe caring about because they haven't been told anything different. So they think they're fine. And then you move off the agenda until the next time you need to become compliant. And then you have the breach. So you followed the letter of the law. What do you think gets enforced?
Yeah. I mean,
it's the intent.
Right? Right, exactly. I mean, there's some of that where it's people going, oh well, it's defensible because I'm doing what they said. Mm-hmm.
No,
it's. I would say what are you in compliance is it's open for interpretation.
Right? Well, it is, man. I mean, tell the OCR, after a breach, the Office for Civil Rights, if you're in healthcare and you just had a breach, I've never seen them investigate a breach and not have findings, not have a corrective action plan, not have a fine.
Yep.
Now, so that's always going to happen, even if you were managing risk, right? If you did security the right way. But I think the fine would be a lot less because when you look at those corrective action plans, the number one thing in all of them is to do a comprehensive risk assessment, that you didn't do a comprehensive risk assessment. Mm-hmm. So that brings us all the way back to step one. When we define what information security is, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
The fact that people still miss that starting step is so frustrating.
Well, and so many, and we've seen it, right? We're working with customers that have had that exact situation where they were doing risk assessments against a narrow scope, right? The healthcare piece, but none of the back office non-healthcare. And I think that's what so many miss. They're like, oh, but I did this risk assessment against the clinic, but you didn't include HR and finance and accounting and IT, or, all these other supporting business units. And
right, which is the mentality, right? Because when I get told by executive management what's the fastest, cheapest way we can get compliant, well, obviously narrow scope.
right. Yep. And I will say, we've been talking about CMMC a lot. It's been in the news. One of the nice things I was able to have a conversation with a certified assessor who's number 70. So that's pretty cool. A really good conversation. And he's looking to get their company certified, and obviously he can't do their certification, but he also wants to bring in an independent third party to help prepare for it, just because it's always good, right? I really enjoyed talking with him. I liked his approach. And I said at the end, I was like, all right, well, let me ask you a question, because I'm curious. What does the CMMC, what guidance have they provided to you around the requirement for significant amount of time for evidence? What does that mean? Is that 6 months? Is that 12 months? Like, what? They're very vague about it. And he said they are leaving it up to the assessor to determine if it is, if it satisfies it. But basically, the end of the day, what they're looking for is, does the company, are they doing it? Do they have a budget for it? So are they giving enough money and finance? Do they have the manpower and staffing to actually do it? And then obviously from a documentation standpoint, has it been around, or is it straight off the presses? If it's hot off the presses, that's never going to cut it. If it's 6 months old and they say, hey, look, we found out and immediately started doing this, and here's our proof that we've been following it since we implemented it, and they should show all the other pieces, then yeah, it might satisfy it. So I thought that was pretty interesting, but I like that approach. I mean,
it's like any approach. I think you have its pluses and minuses. The minus or the negative in that approach is it's subjective. So you'll have a different, well, I want at least a month. And in my interpretation, you need to have 3 staff members in order to do this thing. Whereas another guy might look at it and say, it's got to be there for 6 months and you need 8 staff members.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, obviously I don't know the full details, but,
Right.
But I agree with the overall approach. It's better.
Yeah.
It's better than the checkbox that we've been seeing, right? It's not point in time.
No.
It's not.
And I think it's getting closer because there's less interpretation. There's less letter of the law versus intent of the law.
Well, and right. And the controls are pretty well written in that it's easy to, like, it's pretty clear what they're looking for. I don't think there's a lot of confusion there.
No, but again, that's just like anything, man. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. The thing is with people, it's good people design really cool stuff, and then people start to use it, and then they find ways to abuse it, or they find ways, because the sad thing about some of those controls is they are pretty prescriptive. So there may not be any business benefit to you doing this one thing, but if you want certification, you need to do this one thing. And there's also going to be times, I think, when you do this one thing, and based on your circumstances, the way your business operates, you don't get a lot of security benefit out of that one thing, but you're going to need to have it.
Well,
so double-edged sword, it's good.
And part of it is, so one of the other things that came up is, right now they have DFARS and, based on 800-171. And he said that basically the DoD estimates only 34% of their supply chain is actually doing it, or is meeting the requirement. So it's kind of like, well, hey, we gave you this opportunity. Nobody's doing it. Too bad. Now you have to do it.
Yeah, that's it. I give the government some credit too, because at the end of the day, the government is the customer. And customers need to be telling their suppliers, their vendors, their business partners This is what I expect of you.
Right. Yeah. And, he did say that the other thing, and I think this is we were talking about it before of it growing. He said that it's very, very, it's not surprising that all the other government entities are watching this very closely.
Oh, yeah.
And like, hey, if this actually works, you're going to see it go for basically every government contract is what the
Yeah.
expectation is.
Well, hopefully it's the same process, the same controls, the same
Yep.
everything. Because
Oh yeah, no, they said
need.
they're going to adopt CMMC.
Okay. Because I was reading state of the states are now kind of putting together, not all the states, but a small group of them are now putting together a state ramp. So you have Fed ramp, right? This is state ramp. And I get it, it's good, but my God, you keep creating more stuff for people to do that distracts them from running their business. Don't forget the purpose for a business is to serve their mission, not necessarily to secure information. So if you figure out a way to integrate security into the mission, that's where you get the biggest benefit. So if I have just another thing, I like CMMC too. I mean, based on all the other things that I've seen, but if I've got CMMC and I've got this other thing and this other thing and this other thing, and it's like, oh my God, give me one thing. I think that's some of the frustration for business leaders with compliance.
Yeah, that is a good point. It'll be interesting to see what, if anything, if FedRAMP is impacted by CMMC, because FedRAMP that's a bear. That is a nightmare.
Right. Yeah, and it's expensive as hell, man. If you're a cloud service provider, going through that process, get out the checkbook, man. That's another thing about security too, is I think so many people in our industry sort of abuse it, right? Because I can set up shop. Because I was actually talking to who the hell? What? Oh, okay, another company. I'm not going to mention my name because I don't want that. But they're an IT shop, and they want to get into security, right? And so they're like, well, what should we start with? And they're not asking me this. This is their own internal discussion. Well, they decided, let's get into CMMC. I'm like, and then they told me this. I'm like, so why did you choose CMMC? They're like, well, because, people have to get it. So they see it because they don't, it would be much easier for them to sell because companies have to do it.
Right.
But I was like, well, do you know the timeline for the implementation of CMMC? Do you know how many organizations need to be certified by the time this thing, is fully implemented? So that's your target market, if you will. And then do you understand the competitive landscape there? I mean, you've got some security companies, some huge audit companies that are all involved in this game. And how are you going to butt them out for your business? It's just like, I don't think you should do it, because I think that market's already, so quickly that market's already been saturated. Mm-hmm. And with that will come, I think, but I do like the way CMMC did that too, right? You've got the gap analysis or the gap assessment, and then you've got the certification. I like how they kept those separate.
Right. Yeah. And I do. I really like that you cannot do both.
Right.
Yeah. Right now there are 300 RPO organizations.
Yeah. So you're going to get in that game. You got zero experience, and for what? And what's the target market? I mean, how many government at this point? We can't assume the entire government. Mm-hmm. We can only assume Department of Defense contracts.
Right.
How many of those are there? And then how many of those are going to be, need certification this year, next year?
Well, and then the CMMC, once you're certified, it's good for 3 years too. So it's not like an annual thing that you're going to do readiness every year. Right. Once you get them there, it's maintaining it, right? So if you're not offering those supportive services to help continue it, then what's the benefit for the customer too?
Exactly. when we've seen other compliance, FFIEC for sure, GLBA, you've seen, HIPAA, probably the two biggest ones, where you've seen a number of companies really abuse that will claim, you do these things, work with us and we'll get you HIPAA certified or HIPAA compliant.
Mhm.
It's like, well, what the hell is HIPAA certified? That doesn't exist, first of all, but you've seen it. And people are charging, $10, $20, $30,000 to a healthcare organization that can't afford it. Same with banking. Now everybody in banking, pretty much, not everybody, most banks, credit unions are very much checkbox security.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like, you're missing the point. That's not how security works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been interesting. But the other thing, it's interesting on some of these calls to talk to companies that really, it becomes very clear that 34% compliance rate is probably very accurate, because these are
high.
Yeah. Because, the requirement has been you have to self-certify to DFARS. And we're having conversations with companies that are current contractors or subcontractors, so in the supply chain, that have basically nothing and have no understanding of it. And it's like, well, what have you been doing? Do you know the penalty for lying?
Well, that's another thing too. I think that our industry could use a lot more of, and I know people may not want to hear it, but is more accountability.
Right. Well, and let me see it. So in this, it's big because it's the False Claims Act is what it's at. It's treble damages are 3 times the contract value plus a penalty of $11,000 per claim. And in 2019, fiscal year ending September 2019, Department of Justice had obtained more than $3 billion in settlements and judgments for people violating the False Claims Act. And it's like, if something happens, and they could have just crush you, and you're not going to get contracts with them again, probably.
Right. Well, but I've seen organizations, what they do is they shut down shop, declare bankruptcy, set up shop as another name.
Yeah.
That's they just game stuff, but so, one thing pops into my head. So compliance is good. I like compliance, honestly. What I don't like is when you get your priorities mixed up and you think that compliance is something that it's not. You got to be compliant because we live in a nation of laws.
Right.
But the right approach is to understand, build a good security program, and ensure that compliance is built into it.
Yeah, exactly. That's our approach is, hey, look, let's do security correctly. Let's get you as secure as possible. And in that process, you're going to become compliant. Let's do it right. And if you do it right, you can check the boxes. That's not going to be a problem. Right. But if you just check the boxes, that doesn't mean you're going to be secure.
Exactly. What I'd like to see, maybe in a version 2 or version 3 of maybe CMMC, is like a mitigating controls checklist kind of thing. So like if I don't implement this one control because I have a justifiable reason for it, meaning I'm addressing risk in other ways, or it just doesn't apply to me for some reason, to have like a mitigating control list.
Well, they do have that you can have it not applicable, but you exactly have that very detailed explanation of why it's not applicable. So they sort of have that, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I think the problem has been the reason they went with a pass-fail is people would have those plan of action and milestones and then not really make progress on them, right? Like, okay, well, I know I got to do these things, and gosh, next year I know I got to do these things, and right. It's these companies being, I don't know, I don't want to say negligent or however you want to put it, but not willfully, or I don't want to be anyway. I don't know, right? But they forced their hand, right? Like,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's across the spectrum. I think on once, for people that there's ignorance, they just don't know, right? People don't like to be called ignorant, and I get that, but we're all ignorant about something, and I don't know lots of things.
Right.
But there's certain things that you just need to know to become a responsible business leader, business owner, father, husband. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're just things that I can't claim ignorance on. I can't claim, well, I was supposed to pay taxes. Well, nobody told me that.
Right.
You know, I wasn't supposed, you know, so these things, like, you have the ignorant. And so, and I point fingers at both sides for being ignorant. I think a lot of business leaders just don't want to know, because I've heard that before too. Well, if you tell me this stuff, well, then I have to fix it. It's like, where the hell's the logic in that?
That doesn't, yeah.
Yes, you may have to fix it in time or have a reason on why you didn't fix it, but that just makes sense. That's just good business, right?
Right.
So you got the ignorant on one side, and honestly, you have the willfully negligent people. They're basically criminals running businesses.
That it's a fine line between going, I don't want to hear about it, and I don't, you know, from that ignorance to that negligence. It's a very fine line.
Right. Yeah, I have that saying, because people would say ignorance is bliss, and I'd say, no, it's breach.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, ignorance isn't bliss, it's breach. So what about like the right way then? Because we preach, you know, all the time, the right way to do information security, and I think we can do a lot better just as an industry in explaining what that actually is, how you actually do that, and it's a big part of what we're putting in our book too, right?
Yeah.
The VC handbook is like, here you go.
Exactly that. Yeah, I think, you know, it's to me, the end game is to get the organization to buy in, everybody top to bottom, in what we're doing. But in order to get there, you have to work with the company, right? You can't just be this standalone, dictator approach, which we see all the time of, it's my way or the highway for security, and you have to do it, so you got to listen to me. Well, you're never going to get a truly good security program that way. And so it's reaching out, building those relationships within the organization, and getting their trust, and working with them to understand what's their risk tolerance, how does the organization work, and then giving them the options and say, hey, look, here's my recommendation. We can do this, but if you want to do this, here's the risks associated with it, and educate them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of times we skate over the fact of, you know, how important roles and responsibilities are in an organization. Security doesn't come second nature to everybody, right? And I think sometimes I know personally, I forget that. And so if you don't give somebody specific responsibilities, and you don't communicate those specific responsibilities, and you don't train them and enable them, then they never do it. It never gets done. And so, you know, just, I think starting out with an organization, figuring out what assets you have to work with, what resources, what people do I have, who's going to do what when you run a security program. And at the beginning, start high level, right? Until you really understand how this is all going to kind of work. So, you know, getting to know that, working with executive management to communicate how information security can be used to accelerate the business, how it can be used to accelerate the mission, how we don't want to have a security program that gets in the way of those things because you're not serving the business, right? I mean, it's, if you have a control that you put in place that restricts the ability of the business to make money or serve their mission, you really need to reevaluate that control. That might not be, or probably isn't, the right control.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the creativity piece, and then it's risk management, right? I mean, the definition of information security is managing risk.
Right.
How the hell am I ever going to manage risk if I've never assessed it? If I've never made risk decisions before? If I've never put risk decisions out onto a roadmap and assigned those to people to accomplish and track that progress, however you want to track that progress.
Well,
it's just fundamentals, man.
Yeah, you bring that up, and it triggered this thought. You know, before I started here, I interviewed at a couple places back in Kentucky, And, they're always like, well, what are you going to do from a security perspective? And I said, the first thing I'm going to do is sit down and talk to everyone, talk to IT, talk to the different business leads, and understand, get to know the organization, and then figure out what we have, what is here. And they're like, no, we need somebody to come in and just start doing things. I'm like, okay, good, I'm done. Thank you.
Right.
As soon as you hear that, it's like, no, I can't do that. You can't be successful coming in and saying, all right, everything has to change. You're going to lose you're going to lose it. The company, you're not going to have any credibility.
Yeah, you're absolutely bound to fail, and you will 100% become the scapegoat when the poop hits the fan, because you don't have those relationships, you don't have that support, and you're going to need that when crap really does hit the fan.
Right. And I very clearly remember asking, like, okay, well then, do you have an asset inventory? Do you have hemming and hawing? And I was like, well, how do you do that? You can't do this. It's not how it works.
Well, that's what it's ideal, but it doesn't happen as much as it should. But it's ideal that when you hire a consultant to do information security stuff, or a vCISO, for instance, or a CISO, whoever's going to be the person that's going to help put this thing together, the best place to start the entire engagement is with the CEO. Have a conversation with him or her and ask, what are your expectations? What does a good security program look like to you? And what you'll find is they either don't know in most cases, or their expectations are unrealistic. Yeah. And so, but that's the consulting piece, right? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to say, all right, I get that. Let me explain to you why I don't think it's a good idea for us. And here's what I think is a good idea for us. And the reason why I'm having this conversation with you is I need you at the end of the day to own this. I can't own it.
Right.
No matter how much money you pay me, no matter what you put in the contract, I don't own this thing. You do.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I'm really enjoying this new vCISO I'm working with, because I didn't meet with the CEO, but I met with their security director of security or information security, and then the CIO who he reports up to. And we had an actual interview prior to them signing the contract. So we knew it was like a good fit, and I knew kind of had a good idea of where they're at. And then, even yesterday during the training, the top person had really good questions, was engaged. I go through some of the things around, phishing and some of that stuff and examples, and he chimes in and is like, well, yeah, that really resonated, and it was super engaged, which is rare, and so I feel
I love that stuff.
Oh, it is. It's fun. At that point, it becomes fun. It's not pulling teeth to get progress.
No, man. I mean, the best vCISO things that I've, projects that I've worked on, I became really, really good friends with the people that I was working with, the leadership there, because it's collaborative, right? I'm not here to be Debbie Downer and, I'm here to collaborate. I want to understand the business so I can help this thing succeed. If I'm not providing value to the business, and this is a message for all security people, if you're not providing value to the business, what the hell are you doing here?
Right. And you have to know, I think, too, what that value is. What is the business expecting, right? Because I do have...
Try to quantify it, right?
I have other ones that work with that are extremely happy just having that monthly call to check in and just having it as a resource and somebody to bounce ideas off of and things like that. So it's going to be different for every organization, but knowing what they expect and what they want and what they need is what makes it successful or not. So
yeah, I love getting those expectations, and then it also helps when I ask a question like that, like, what do you expect out of the security program? What do you envision it being? What would it be for something that you would, because what I need from a CEO is I don't need you to tolerate my security program, our security program. I need you to champion our security program. And I'm not asking for a ton of time. I'm asking for maybe 15 minutes a month, maybe, just to give you kind of current state of affairs. This is what you said your expectations are. This is how I'm meeting those. But yeah, I mean, if you don't get that, then you're shooting in the dark. Chances are really good that you won't meet expectations, or because unrealistic expectations are the shittiest. Excuse my language. I mean, they're the worst.
Yeah, agreed. And not being clear about that, like we said, it's going to set you up for failure. Like, how do I know what you're expecting if we don't talk about it? How do you know what it's got to go both ways. You have to have that communication. You have to have a relationship so that there aren't these big misses.
Right. Well, and as a security professional, I mean, if you're in a position where you don't get face time with the CEO, or you can't get face time with the CEO, no matter what you do, you got to question if this is the right place for you to be working, because the expectation from the CISO, I'm not expecting a weekly 1 hour meeting,
right?
Although that would be awesome. What I'm asking for is, can I get 15 minutes a month? Can I get 20 minutes, a month? And if you can't get that kind of buy-in from the CEO, that's a great indicator of where this is headed eventually.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too is just the way the consulting works and stuff. I think you have to build a little bit of a relationship and trust with your primary contact right? Like, I don't feel like I can go in and demand that right away. Like, I need to assess the situation, where they're at, where their program is, and build that relationship, and then say, okay, we know where we're at. Here's what we need to do, and then bring that up, right? I don't think it would be successful going in day one and say,
Right.
hey, I need 20 minutes a month with your executive leadership.
No, well, maybe. I mean, it depends on, why you engaged in the first place. If it's just to be a resource versus, do you want me to own this and drive this? I mean, not truly own it, because I can't do that, but I can treat it like I own it. I can drive this security program. I can start, setting up projects and having people do things. And I think with your point of contact, you can always lay that out. Like, hey, here's the steps. At some point in the next month, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We need to talk to the CEO or board or whoever.
Right. No, I would agree. And, like, that's worked well with the one I'm doing, now. We delivered their assessment results 2 weeks ago or so. And, we're going to go through the roadmap tomorrow, I believe. But one of the first things after that was, hey, look, we've got this meeting. Can you get in front of all these people and, do this? And that's perfect. That's exactly what you want.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And so you can see that you take that approach, the approach that we've been talking about the last, 5-10 minutes, and compare that against the approach of compliance. You know what I mean? It's just vastly different.
Yep. Yeah. You're going to be far more successful with the approach that we take than that. And, it's not to say that that's going to prevent all breaches. We see it happen, right? It's a matter of, not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We just want to try and push that win out as far as we can and make it as small as possible.
Right. And I've had CEOs, I've had these conversations with CEOs. I've asked them, what are your expectations? And a common one, meaning I've heard it more than a few times, is, I want you to keep me out of the news. Right? Okay. I get that. Who wants to be in the news for something like this? But I will never be able to meet that expectation. And right. they're always kind of surprised, like, what do you mean? I go, because I can't guarantee you bad things won't happen. They will.
Right.
And when those bad things happen, at least you'll have a story to not look like such a dipshit, you know what I mean, to the rest of the world. You'll be like, right. Yeah, well, this is what we were doing to prevent this, and bad things happen. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah. It just, yeah, it still surprises me. I know it shouldn't, but it's like I just can't get over the fact that people are still, given everything we've seen, still have that approach.
Oh yeah, that's still somewhat common. Another somewhat common, not they don't say it in so many words, but I've heard it numerous times. Is and the most of the time I get it in the form of a question, and it's kind of a rhetorical question. It's will information security make me more money?
I
I'm
mean,
like, well, maybe. I mean, it depends. That will really, really, really depend upon your involvement with me. If you will be really tightly, I mean, if you want to work towards that, yeah, we can make it part of the culture, right?
mhm,
We can look for all business processes that are overcomplicated because complexity is the enemy of security. So we can go through that and streamline as many processes as we can. Take those 30-step processes, make them into 2-3-step processes, realize efficiencies in business operations, and at the same time, get the security benefit, right? We can also brainstorm about how we can use every one of our information security dollars that we're investing as a marketing play, as a business differentiator, as to get more customers. So I mean, if you get creative, so the answer to the CEOs that have asked me that before, it's like, yes, but your return on your investment will be directly related to your involvement.
yeah, yeah, and understand it's tough to quantify that.
Right, right, and that's again why we would need more, involvement from the CEO, because we'd have to agree upon. All right, I bet you this 10-step, 30-step, 50-step process was probably costing the company, work through some math, give them the variables and say, well, I think it was probably costing the company $500,000 a year. Now that we've streamlined it into a 2-step process, it seems, based on, how much human involvement and stuff like that, maybe we've got it down to $200,000 or $150,000 a year.
Yeah,
Well, that's a $350,000 return on your investment. It cost us $30,000, not necessarily return on investment, but cost us $30,000 to go through the process of evaluating, refining that process. We put in $50,000 worth of security controls, so we're more secure, and we got a positive ROI.
right.
It just takes a hell of a lot of creativity, and I think a lot of us don't get the time to do that. They don't
Yeah,
give us
that's a
the time.
good point. And like you said, it's kind of an intangible ROI, right? How do you have to agree ahead of time that, hey, this is how we're going to measure it,
Mhm.
and it's hard to get people to do that sometimes.
Yeah, and in all honesty, uh, with all the security projects I've done and you've done, I've never once had a CEO take me up on that.
Yeah,
Where they've said, I've heard it more than once, that hey, well, well, will security make me more money? The first time I ever heard that, I didn't have an answer. I was just like, I probably not. I don't know. And then, but I don't like being in that position. So then I obsessed about it for like the next week. Like, how are all the ways I can answer that question? Yeah, of course we can. So then, probably 3 times after that, maybe 4 times after that, CEOs have asked me that same question, and the answer's been yeah, but this is what it's going to take. And they're all like,
that sounds
no,
like,
I'm gonna go focus my time on marketing or
yeah.
business development.
I've gotten that approach from more of an IT perspective, but it's the same thing. Like, hey, here's the justification for this piece of software. It takes me 15 minutes a day to do this task. That adds up. If we
Yep.
get this software, it goes to 15 minutes a week. We're now saving, an hour a week. That's 52 hours a year at this price. Here's what it costs. It's going to, save this money and allow me to do these other things. And it is really effective when you can do that and show that, because otherwise people go, you want to spend money on software? Why are we doing that? It's working fine now.
Right.
Yeah, takes me an hour a day.
Well, and that's another thing about culture, in companies. No two companies are exactly the same. So what resonates with one CEO or board of directors doesn't resonate with another.
Mhm.
that's why, again, it's really important that when you start off on this journey, or depending, no matter where you're at in the journey, at some point, you need to really understand what's important to them. You know, do they want to make more money? Is there a mission? And they're so just mission driven that money's kind of a secondary thing. Well, then focus on that damn mission. Show how everything we're doing in this information security program is making us better towards that mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get budget all the time. It's crazy how that happens.
Right. Yeah. That's a kind of a, I don't know the right word here, but it's a lost skill. It's not something that, or a missing skill for a lot of people in security, is, talking to and understanding, and then being able to execute on what drives the rest of the company. Right? You have to adjust your approach to meet them, or otherwise it's going to be really tough.
Yep. Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, it's an art form, I think, and there's just sometimes when you just don't click.
Right. Well, and in those cases, we've had this happen where either the analyst or the company is like, hey, I just don't think this is I think we've had it with the analyst going, hey, you know what? I think so-and-so would be a better fit for this. Their just personalities are going to match better than, and it's going to be more successful. Awesome. Don't be afraid to do that. And we've had companies go and say the same thing, like, hey, so-and-so is fantastic, but it's just not the right fit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you can't take that personally.
No, don't take it personally.
I'd rather them, from our side of it, from FRSecure, I'd prefer them to tell us, hey, can we try something out? Like, it's just not working, rather than them being unhappy and disengage and leave.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure, man.
We got plenty of analysts with plenty of different backgrounds and different personality types. We can get somebody to fit. I think the SAs are pretty good at doing that as well, of kind of gauging the customer and making some recommendations of, hey, I think so-and-so would be really good for this.
Well, and from an analyst perspective too, it can get personal. You pour so much heart and soul and time and energy into our work, right? I mean, we genuinely care about the people we serve, and to be told by somebody that you serve that they don't like you,
I don't think
or whatever. Yeah, but it comes off that way. That's the way you feel it. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I can totally see that. Personally, it's like, okay, I get it. I know that, and usually too. Like, you can tell if it's not going to be, if it's not going well. But yeah, I can see that.
Well, but your advice is about not taking it personal. And for every one company that it doesn't fit, there's probably 500 that do.
Right.
So just, dust off and keep going.
Well, it's like any relationship, right? You're not going to get along with everyone. It just is the reality.
Right.
You can do your best. So.
Yeah. I'm betting like 20%. I think 1 out of 5 kind of dig, working with me. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm going to guess it's a little higher than that.
Yeah, maybe 1.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
All right. So news.
Yeah, news. So I sent you last
good talk,
week.
By the way, man. I really enjoy talking with you. It's always fun.
I think it's more fun when we go a little bit more unstructured and just let it happen.
Yeah, I agree.
So first one I sent last week, suspected Chinese hackers used SolarWinds bug to spy on U.S. payroll agency. This is off of Reuters. And it was a different, it's a different software flaw than what the Russian government operatives are using or were using. So, I mean, pretty brutal for SolarWinds Orion.
Right. Yeah.
I think the problem is not necessarily with SolarWinds itself, in terms of like maybe they had, well, I'm not going to defend them, but just the fact that they're so prevalent, they become an incredibly high value target.
Right. Well,
So
hindsight is 2020, obviously, but you just I just wish they would have, known some of the things they know now then, because I don't think there was any, malicious intent by SolarWinds. I mean, it's easy to vilify them, but you know, they were doing the best they could. I'm sure it caught them more by surprise than anybody else. But the part that sort of, I guess, concerns me is, the United States and China and Russia and Israel and Great Britain and Canada and North Korea, we are at war.
mhm.
The Chinese government is not our friend, period.
No,
And I
yeah.
know in a politically correct world, we may really, really, really want to be friends. No, we're not.
Well, I mean, reality is it's not any different than what has been the case with spying and stuff like that. It's just how it's being done has changed.
Right. Well, in the Cold War, when with Russia and I guess a little bit of China, the Cold War, we were much more skeptical of things from Russian origin, and we were a little more protective of ourselves and the things that we consume in terms of electronics and information. But today we just seem to be so willy-nilly and we just blow this stuff off. Like, these were Chinese hackers, state sponsored, in our governments, some of the most sensitive places of our government.
Hmm. Yeah. This is it was the National Finance Center. So the federal payroll agency and inside the Department of Agriculture was among the affected organizations. So you now have, potentially some sensitive information on a lot of government employees. So yeah, it's gonna
Yeah,
be.
they serve 160 agencies and 600,000 federal employees.
Mhm.
It's nuts.
Yeah, they are separate and distinctly different operations. So it's just crazy.
And so with SolarWinds, just to recap, the involvement by who, the Chinese and the Russians have both been implicated in maybe not the same attack, but that they coordinate. I mean, it's no coincidence that they were both in and using flaws or
Yeah.
whatever in
Well,
Orion.
it's this is kind of like, well, what are they doing to each other that they both knew about this stuff, right? They're both infiltrating. It's like just yeah,
We
yeah,
share intelligence with our allies. I mean, we share intelligence with Canada, with Great Britain, with Israel. They share intelligence with each other.
yeah. So scary. This is just going to continue. It's going to be months before we know everything.
It's funny, Chris Roberts on Thursday's shit show, he brought up, we were talking about this a little bit, and he said, well, the United States is doing it too. I said, yeah, but I'm on that team.
Right.
I don't care if my team's winning. I don't want the other team to win.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, what you can do. Second article we had was from the Register. U.S. court system ditches electronic filing, goes paper only for sensitive documents following the SolarWinds hack. In the filing, lawyers required to hand in dead tree copies. No, seriously. But yeah, the U.S. court system has banned electronic submission of legal documents in sensitive cases out of concern that Russian hackers have compromised the filing system. So any document that contains information that is likely to be of interest to the intelligence service of a foreign government has to be physically printed out and provided in physical format. So
I like it. I like it. If anything, I like it because lawyers are involved too, and I know how much they hate anything that's inconvenient. Because nobody's time is more valuable than a lawyer's time. So I
mhm.
kind of like that. even if they're going to give it to clerks and everything to do with that stuff. But yeah, it's definitely more secure.
I read something, and I have to go back and find it if I'm remembering it correctly, that some of the German government has gone back to typewriters for some of their more super sensitive stuff. Like, nope, you're going to type some of these types of things up, it's offline, it's mechanical, it's not electronic.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm the longer I've been in security, the more I appreciate the simple things and the analog things, doing things the manual way. We adopt all these technologies all the time in the name of convenience, in the name of making our lives easier. And it just hasn't, man. I mean, my life is more chaotic than it's ever been.
yeah. Yeah. Last one is one you sent over, which I hadn't seen, which is incredibly scary, is from BBC. Hacker tries to poison water supply of Florida City. This happened in Oldsmar, Florida. And they got access to a computer remotely and tried to increase the amount of sodium hydroxide, which is lye, in the treatment system. Luckily, a worker spotted it and reversed it, basically immediately. But why is that system remotely accessible? Was the first thing I thought of.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about the catastrophic. I mean, it could have been much. I don't know how many people would have really died, but there would have been many people get sick, from drinking that water. And it could cause widespread panic too, right? I mean, people would maybe stop drinking tap water altogether and go to bottled water. So you'd have a rush on bottled water. We've seen what's happened with, COVID and, kind of the mass hysteria, associated with that. This is a big deal, man, because it could have very easily gone undetected. The fact that the attacker was basically using some sort of remote access software, I'm guessing, because the operator who was there at the time saw the mouse moving on the screen, and that's what alerted him to, like, what the hell's going on?
Right.
If he wouldn't have been sitting there, or if the attacker would have used something non-GUI related,
right,
we wouldn't have known, and it would have gone off successfully.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and the problem is, and they do mention it in here, is that you've got basically your utilities are running on out of date, SCADA systems with no redundancy. So, it's like, well, we can't take it down because it's critical infrastructure.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what are you going to do? Excuse me, when this happens or it gets ransomed because you didn't patch it? It isn't. Nah. Whatever.
You see that, and that's where it's such an illogical argument. Would you rather have a planned outage for you to implement some redundancy into the system and patch it so it makes it much more, serviceable, or so do you want a planned outage or do you want an unplanned outage, right? Because if you don't do something about this, you're going to have an unplanned outage. And if that's your choice, well, then let's go take a look at your incident response plan and all that other shit, because you're going to need it sooner rather than later.
Right. Yep.
And stop building crap without redundancy, and stop building crap with, oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. Well, and the problem is a lot of these were built so long ago that it wasn't a consideration.
Well, a lot of them are running XP or NT. I've seen some NT.
Yeah.
So there was redundancy and
oh yeah, no, but I'm saying it wasn't a consideration when it was built. That wasn't something people were really were thinking about.
Yeah, I guess. Obviously.
Yeah. All right. Well, good conversation. That is for episode 118. Thank you, Evan. Got any shout outs?
I got a shout out for yeah, I do. I'm gonna give a shout out for Atanas. People don't know Atanas. Atanas does development, leads the development on the Security Studio side. We had our meeting this morning at 4:30 a.m. Central, and he went through a nice laundry list of things. Man, that team is just running at full steam. So shout out to him.
I've been impressed with the progress that they made. We've been, been more involved the last year really, and just leaps and bounds, and just how responsive he is to requests and stuff. So yeah, I agree with that. I think for my shout out, I'm going to go with, teachers and educators, just based on the experience that I've had with my kids and their teachers, with all the e-learning and now the transition back, and they've just been phenomenal and very, flexible and understanding of kind of how difficult this is for the kids, and try to make it as positive an experience as it can be. And I know it's tough on them as well. So
yeah, I'll definitely second that, man. I agree.
all right. Thank you to all our listeners. Send us things by email at unsecurity@protonmail.com. We have seen several emails come in.
Yeah.
If you're the social type, socialize with us on Twitter. I'm at Brad Nye, and Evan is at Evan Francine. And lastly, be sure to follow Security Studio at Studio Security, and FRSecure at FRSecure for more things. They're constantly pumping out really, really good content, way more than I do.
Yeah.
So that's it, and we will talk to you all next week.
Awesome.